Chapter 35. My good news. My life as one of you and among you was devoted neither to have my blood shed, nor to leave you such a message that I have redeemed your sins with my blood. That would be a big untruth. Such a message of mine has nothing to do with the love and mercy of the Creator, the Universal Father. Such a message is very cruel to all the generations that have been passing it from one to another. I'm that Christ, that Jesus of Nazareth, who has really experienced that cruel and tormenting death on the cross. However, my news was being carried to my brethren at the time when I walked across Galilee and Judea and traveled across other lands of the Mediterranean. At that time, I was not hanging on the cross. It was at that time that I was carrying my news, that I was to remain in your hearts, to release the spiritual vibrations of your soul, so that they would be fusing with the vibrations of the spiritual luminosity of the Creator, the Father, being sent to each of us. And at that time, there was no cross at all. And I did not speak about any sin redemption either. And no one had even the slightest idea that I would be so cruelly tortured to death on the cross. Meanwhile, thousands listened to my news, to the living news of my living Jesus. When thousands listened to me, when thousands believed the good tidings pronounced by me, nobody, even in their mind, called me Christ. They rejoiced in the good news that I brought, and it was that good news that should save each, that good news in particular, and not my death on the cross, which only ended my mortal life among you. That was the very end of my mission. Meanwhile, I had been preaching my good tidings for many years, at first spreading it alone by myself. Wherever I found myself, wherever I traveled, I explained to the people that good news. When I saw that people were receiving the good news with great hope and trust, that the good news was comforting and strengthening them, I decided that I had to train my disciples who would preach the good news of mine after my departure from this world, when they would be no longer able to hear and see me teaching all the people in the human flesh. And I did know about my future tragic departure, and I did not pay much significance to that departure. All my attention was focused on preaching the good news and on training my disciples who would be carrying that news across the world and preaching it fearlessly after my departure from this world. My good news was, is, and shall be only this: the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. And some of you already now preach this very message, even in an expanded manner, and that is correct: the brotherhood of the whole creation. But 2,000 years ago, I could not preach the brotherhood of the whole creation because man's concept of the creation was very poor. Today, it is still poor, even though the number of such people who understand that your world is not the only planet that holds life on it is ever growing. And the number of such brethren of yours who will be looking upon the creation in a still deeper way will ever increase as well. And they will perceive that the other planets holding life forms of the human level are not the only planets with life, as there are also other worlds with different spiritual life forms designed by the divine life. And an ever greater number of your brethren will start to realize better that in creation there is such a life form that is in between the material human life form and the divine spiritual life form. And this intermediary life form is a divine spiritual life form. And an ever greater number of your brethren will start to realize better that in creation there is such a life form that is in between the material human life form and the divine spiritual life form. And this intermediary life form is a transitional life form, the soul life form, while it is passing from the material life vehicle or the body to the spiritual. Therefore, I congratulate all these brethren of mine who have already expanded my good news from the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man to the brotherhood of the whole of creation. When I was in the human flesh on this world, I had to adapt myself to the concepts of the people of that time. But I wanted to both strengthen the concepts and strengthen those concepts that had been distorted. I cannot tell you the things that your mind is unable to understand today either. But you must know that the reality is so sophisticated, so versatile, that it is impossible to completely comprehend it, even for me, even though my origin is divine, for I directly come from deity. However, it is this partial unknowing that provides one an urge to strive for still more and to strive for what has not yet been known, because reality itself is being developed by the Creator, who is infinite and eternal. It is only He who knows the panorama of the whole reality. When I was in the human form on this world, I had to expand the spiritual vibrations of the people's consciousness very carefully. Even my good tidings were too blinding for the majority. But all the people of goodwill, common and poor people, listened to my good news. God the Father is one to all the people, and all the people are brethren, very sincerely. And whoever believes this good news, that one is received by the Father in his kingdom. The explanation about the Father of all and his vast family was much closer to me, but this teaching was not yet received by the Jews, that God the Father had his family, which was one, and common to both the Gentiles and Jews, who started to have faith in the Father. For Jews, it was too hard to see themselves in one family with the Gentiles, who, according to their understanding, had no belief and were unworthy of an adequate attention and similar love as the Judaic believers. Therefore, I had to adapt myself to their long-cherished message of the Messiah coming, when through generations it had been expected that a Messiah would come and step onto the vacant throne of King David and liberate them from the yoke of the unbelieving Gentiles. In that environment, the concept of the family was the light that was too bright and blinding. And because I had to diminish my teaching light, I was a little bit upset, for I had to distort my own teaching about the Father. However, compromises are necessary if one desires to reach a less developed, from a spiritual standpoint, human mind. and that compromise I did make on purpose. For the Jews, as well as for the other believers, I introduced the metaphor of the heavenly kingdom rather than the Father's spiritual family.